Okay. So there are a few things here that are important. Let's begin the way that we did with everything up to this point, by just figuring out the general placement on the page, the general angles, and tilts as well. So just to make sure, you can take a couple of angles just to be sure what that tilt is, because you see the eye here, and by eye I refer to the entirety of the cast. I'm not only talking about the eye, right? I'm not only talking about the eye. And this is very, very important. So this is, I'm not going to get into too many anatomical concepts or any of that. I don't think that's that important at the moment. But the idea is, right, to think of the eye, and you see that this becomes important even more later on. The idea is to think of the eye as the area around the eye as well. And in this case, this problem is kind of just right ahead, right in front of us. It's solved for us because we have the cast, and we need to figure out the cast in its entirety and draw the cast in its entirety. So see, I'm more concerned right now with this, like the front plane of the rectangular prism, almost a square. I'm interested in the tilt, right? So we can even kind of try to imagine what the plane is here, right? Like, what is the plane that I'm looking at? Because I'm interested in seeing the eye tilting a bit. This will all help, right? This will all help. At the same time, I do want to talk a little bit about what this assignment is at the Academy of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg. In the Repin Academy, this assignment is done right after the skull, right? So it's a little bit more part of anatomy than it is an exercise about changes of plane, light and shadow, and all this. It's all of that coupled with anatomy. Now, I think doing this earlier, right, before we get into the skull and all of that, is actually helpful, because it already introduces you, and you realize that a general idea of my approach and my interpretation of the approach is that I believe in spending time on just getting accustomed to something and what it looks in a sort of unadulterated way. And I think that is, in a lot of ways, preferable, at least to begin with, before you then go and analyze and understand what the form is in terms of the internal structures and all of that stuff. So at the same time, I'm observing, I'm taking angles, going from this inner corner to this outer corner, right? Seeing what those are, seeing what this whole area of the brow looks like, just working in line, some alignments, mainly trying to see what the proportions are here. The proportions in this eye are quite nice, right? I would go for the entirety of the sort of small eye, right? The eye as we just understand the eye itself, and move it up. This proportion, it's exactly, this line should be the halfway point between here and here. This part underneath should be smaller. So let's make that correction, right? Don't just think of everything inside the eyelids. At least think of it to the top of the upper eyelid as you see it, and the lowest part of the eyelid underneath. So as you see, I already have something that's a semblance of that eye at the appropriate tilt, and just a general feeling of the cast in space. Okay, so I'm just going to keep at it without breaking it up as of yet. We have not had the practice of taking a form that's organic and breaking it up. We did it with some of the cylindrical objects, but we we went from a form that had a plane, and then we went and sort of smoothed it out. In this case, the process is the inverse. We need to see something that appears like it has a very smooth, even curvature and break it up into planes, at least a little bit. Now, okay, now I will kind of return to what this assignment was in school. The assignment in school was more anatomical. Now, I think what's the advantage of doing it now, as I said, is you're getting accustomed to it, and we're practicing all these things that we've practiced. But what's most important is that once we do get into the anatomy of the skull and the orbits of the eyes and all that stuff, then you can then come back to this assignment and work alongside me once again, except this time having a little bit of an advantage in a sense, because now you'll know what those forms are, but there's also the advantage of you having done this before, done this more than once, right? And that's all practice really is. It's just doing things over and over again until you improve. So now, as you see, I'm sort of penciling in, the fact that I'm using a pencil is the other thing, but I'm just sort of jotting sort of the end of the lower eyelid as you see it, starting from the inner corner, moving to the outer corner. But I'm also beginning to hint at the general shadow, right? I'm not getting there yet, but I just want it there for proportions, because I'm thinking that the distance between the inner corner and the side of the cast, so something's a little off in what I'm doing here. But I'm not going to change the general proportions. And you sort of remember what the main concept is. The main concept is you take the proportions, you take the angles after you have something on the page. Right, so I pretty much am taking the way to think of this is to think of the whole thing as a sphere. And then begin to lay in your shadows a little bit, right? So that you just, it's not even about, at this point, it's just try to avoid some of this confusion. Right? Clear things up by making sure you see your lights, see your shadows, work within those shadows a little bit. And just let's get them in place, right? And right now, don't make too many distinctions between cast and core in terms of value. Just gonna even this out with smear it a little, get it a little bit softer so that I don't get those hatch marks in the way and get all right. At the moment, see, I'm erasing that the light on the lower eyelid. I'm erasing it because and of course in reality I squint and I can see that it's a darker value than say some of these things, but right, we're following the procedure, which means that all our lights are left as light as the page itself. All right, so I think we're getting somewhere though. I think something's happening. I think something is happening, and now I'm going to just make sure, right? Don't forget that we're thinking of the entirety of the cast, the block of the cast, the eye with the capital I, the capital E, my goodness. Don't overdo it though. We don't need that to be the main contrast. This is extracted from the head and made into an object of our admiration. Now, the idea, of course, is possibly we are trying to get the proportions right because we're trying to practice that. So that's important. And also, and a very important aspect here is that there are sort of proportions in the cut itself that are rather harmonious. And I think preserving them, they're not as arbitrary. Like on the one hand, you can cut it in many places, but on the other, those proportions can themselves be harmonious. You can take apart the amount of space above the eye, below the eye, to the right and to the left. Can have a bit of impact on their own, even. Obviously not the intended impact of the artist. More so the intended impact of the person who decided to crop here. But as we know, the most cropping is the main action of composition. Moving things around is important to get them in place, but it's that crop, which is really what most of composing is. All right. So I have that line there, from where the error, proportional error was, and I kind of, I like it though, right? It remains as something that you look back on and it reminds you of the mistake you made. And that's kind of in the process of education, a good thing. Maybe resolving some of these things, right? And at times resolving it is just removing the edge altogether, right? I mean, maybe there is no edge, there is no line. Maybe to finish that form, you just a thin semblance of one. Let's see what's happening here. Right, I'm getting a sense here. I feel like maybe adding now maybe a little bit more values on the parts that are in fact a little bit rounder, a little bit more curved, a little bit more turned away is what we need more than anything else. We have plenty of it, but I feel like why not have just a little bit more? Okay. For the most part, I think we have a good eye here, and have really kind of taken our skills to the next level. So let's just clean up a little bit. All right, so that's the eye. Now let's keep practicing this by moving on to the other parts of the face.